Welcome back to the show, everybody. Today we've had two outstanding lectures in the morning, and we're going to start our afternoon lectures with Anthony Passamonte, who is a co founder and owner at Stacked Up Fitness. He is an expert, in my opinion, in running technique and training for strength and power. He's worked across the board with athletes from all different sports and all different age groups very successfully. Has been a personal trainer to NHL players and outstanding sports leaders in their own right. So Anthony's going to talk about what I feel are, if you're going to have a strength and conditioning program for young kids, my guys in the gym, they're 8, 9, 10, they see the older boys using the weights. How do we train, and which activities do you train right off the bat with very little weight, and then be able to progress? But how do you train technique for little kids who, now the research shows that it's reasonably acceptable to have strength and conditioning with weights and kettlebells for kids 11, 10, 11, 12 years old. If I'm wrong, Mr. Tilly, Dr. Tilly, and Dr. Pujao will tell me later on.
You
And
are not.
I believe that if you do number one thing with strength and conditioning, and most of the injuries come not from the amount of weight or even necessarily, like muscle strains and pulls, but most of the injuries come from lack of supervision. So if you can provide a supervised, structured, progressed environment where you start slow and teach technique over a long period of time, and then gradually, don't overtrain your athletes and focus on your technique. I integrate strength and conditioning with kettlebells and barbells with my younger gymnasts, and they love it. They feel like they're given a responsibility, and I sit there and make sure their technique and their safety is to be what's expected. So, with that, I would say welcome to Anthony. He's going to go through some of the fundamental exercises that I think that we would want to include in any strength and conditioning exercise, and I'm sure that Dave Tilley and Duesh Puja will also reflect on. But without any further ado, I would like to introduce and give Anthony the mic.
All right. Well, Dan, again, I appreciate really wonderful words. Again, it's been kind of a crazy year, and yeah, who knows, with everything. So, been busy. That's for sure. So I've actually had a great opportunity to really start a new business with one of my partners here, Lindsay Korak, Stacked Up Fitness, and so we kind of focus on fitness, fuel, and life. And that's exactly right, Dan. When you bring it up into kind of what you're talking about as gymnasts is to me, working with gymnasts over the last really, 5, 10 years now, specifically in working with you, what I have found is that gymnasts are some of the hardest working athletes out there. And I say this every single time I do a presentation, right? These young kids can do things that I can't even dream of, right? And we're asking them to do such high level skills at such a young age as they're starting to develop their bodies. And we find that the more and more we push them for competition, the more and more they're getting injured from really some basic fundamental movements that just are not established before they get into these higher skills. And it is the life of a gymnast, right? I mean, that is the world they live in. So it's this like double-edged sword. They need to learn higher level skills, but at the same time need to develop the fundamentals and the foundational movement patterns. And so there's this like cross between, do you take the time to put in strength and conditioning in the basic nature of what it's going to be to help these kids on this long-term development model, if you would, or do you force them into doing skills? And I know we've talked about in the past of, do we work on stabilizing the shoulder so that they can actually turn out and externally rotate the rings out to stabilize the shoulders, or do they just work on holding it tight? And it is a battle between coaches. And you hear, other professionals, Dave, talk a lot about it as well, how the change and the shift in how coaches need to think to help their kids develop can actually exponentially get them better at their skills and actually do it safer than just trying to grind something that might not be there. So that's kind of like my overview of how we're going to look at today when it comes to really strengthening the conditioning, how you can add very basic movements within a routine or take just a half an hour, 20 minutes out of really your coaching sessions to develop these foundational skills that can really elevate a kid's performance just by these simple movements, whether it's bands, pattern training, and then basic primitive movements too, like bear crawls and apes, and have some deliberate practice into it. So I'm going to pull up and share the presentation screen on it right here. And what I'm going to do, just start that up. And let's do it. So really what this is here, and again, what we're going to do is we're going to talk through really the fundamental strength movements needed for every gymnast, and what every gymnast needs to know. And it really comes back down to hinge patterns, squat patterns, upper body pull movements to help stabilize really the upper body, and really offset stabilization and cross pattern work so they can understand how to move their bodies more effectively than just this practice of their skills, because that's what they're thinking about. And I think that's huge. I think that's important to remember is the deliberate practice of strength and conditioning movements. If you ask a kid when they're practicing gymnastics, what they're thinking about, and most kids would probably tell you that they just don't want to fall, that they want to make sure the rotation is good, that they're doing the things that the coach wants them to. And they're not necessarily thinking how their body's moving, they're thinking about just doing. And that's kind of the change when you bring in a strength and conditioning program into a gymnastic setting, is to have them really focus on how to balance. How do you really push through? Get them off the floor. Get them not almost thinking about gymnastics and the routine, but actually think about how their bodies move. So that's a little bit of what we're going to bring in. Again, we kind of already talked about being a strength coach in this industry is slightly different than being a gymnast. And we kind of look at it as how can we develop these young athletes for the long-term benefits of having a career beyond gymnastics. How do they become, stronger? How do they become better at structuring their shoulders? And many gymnasts, this isn't their only sport. There's this push to try to get them to be multiple sport athletes. Well, again, and that's another part to all this too, is that they're not going to be seeing, coaches as much as they used to. And so a gymnast nowadays, if they're in the rec program, they might only get 3 to 4 hours of gymnastics involved. And so you need to make sure that they're prepped up, ready to do the higher skills and higher practice of rotation and balance and stabilization, because they run a higher risk of injury if they don't. So there's a lot of things here, and I'll kind of digress at that level. But the biggest thing here is that it is critical to develop strength and balance and stability and mobility with a gymnast, and really having deliberate practice with it. We talk about joint by joint understanding. I pull up this slide because a lot of times we need to understand that our body is just built on stability, mobility at that joint site. And if we don't have the strength in our muscles to deal with the tension and the torque and the rotation, to deal with the stresses that we have on our bodies, then ultimately injuries are going to happen. And that's kind of the critical thing, is the cause and effect of having really imbalances with mobility, stability, and strength. All that really is simply potential for injury. When you have misalignments in your body, when there's mobility here, lack of stability there, not enough strength, it's just boom, chance of injuries skyrocket. And it could even be this: you could be overdeveloped in some areas of muscle, right? Quad dominant, you're strong in your quads, but not in the hamstrings. That's why we see a lot of female athletes getting more hamstring injuries and ACL issues, because of the misalignments in body muscle activation there, and everything. So the big thing is just imbalances in your body create potential injury. And that's why we want to really kind of focus in. There's a great video to understand how to avoid back pain too. We won't go to it, but definitely if you have the ability to get the presentation, click that link. It's really great to see. So Now, it kind of brings me right to this. It brings you right to the top 5 movements to focus on. And Dan and I talk about this a lot. We've had the great privilege of being able to put together some great programs, I think, that have shown amazing results when you take kids out of or off the floor and you just practice with them. You can see some really great kind of changes in the body. Not only are they less fatigued, right? I mean, we run these kids down on the ground a lot, but if you take them away and give them a chance to kind of breathe, focus on movement patterns, you can see the advancements in their performance later down the road. You can see balance increases. Again, the list of benefits to what happens when you add a strength conditioning program into your program is huge. And what we found is 5 movements that you can focus on. And these 5 movements can span thousands of exercises. So today what we're going to do is we're going to kind of break down some of the base level movements, the functional base level movements that can be just pattern recognition, dowel stick, having one kettlebell, and being able to utilize various movement patterns in this. We're not talking about any coach or training facility or even parents going out and buying thousands of dollars worth of equipment. We're talking you could create a very strong strength and conditioning, balance, stability program and tools at your house or gym if you want for most likely under $50 even. So it's supposed to be cost effective and nothing that you really have to invest that much money in. The only thing is you have to invest your time and deliberate practice in all the movements. So these movements really come down into hinge patterns, which are really understanding like this hip dominant work, RDLs, deadlifts. And what I mean by that is really just pulling things from the floor, being able to brace your core, pulling things from the floor. Squat patterns, being more of knee dominant exercises, things that will kind of focus on skeletal loading, right? Loading up your body from shoulders down and forcing you to push really from the floor. So we'll talk a little bit more about that. Upper body pull work. We talk about rows and scap work, working on stabilizing the shoulders. So there's bent rows, there's dumbbell training, there's bands that we'll work on. It's more about strength and stability within the upper body. And then you have really kettlebell get ups and kettlebell arm bars. We love incorporating that into the training on the fact that that one single tool, the kettlebell, can help really connect your core, connect your body from fingertips to toes. And so when we get down into that part of the talk, what's going to end up happening is you're going to see offset training and core training and working on these myofascia kind of cross pattern slings in your body so that again everything connects, front side, back side, and cross pattern connections. So we'll talk about that and how the kettlebell can work through that. And really also too, some of the other things that we talk about is animal flow movements, primal movements, and we can discuss that if we do have time. So as we get into it, I'll quickly go over the 5 movements, and then we'll take you guys out onto the floor here in the stacked up studio, and I'll have Lindsay come in, and we'll kind of practice some of these movements, and you can kind of see the good form, bad form, and things to look out for. So, like I said before, we have really hinge patterns, hip dominant work, RDLs and deadlifts, things that we'll talk about there. You can use dowel sticks, one kettlebell. There's a lot of things that you can, little cues that can help when you're coaching a young athlete, things that they might not see and little cues that help get them to understand the movement pattern itself. Squat patterns, we're going to talk about goblet squats, rear foot elevated split squats, or RFEs as they're known. What's amazing about this is that these rear foot elevated not only help stretch out your hips, get the hip flexors loosened up a little bit, psoas muscle release the tension. We do a lot of sitting, so kind of changing that up, but it also forces you to work your backside and drive from the backside posterior chain of your glutes and your hamstrings. So it's a great exercise to get involved there, especially if any of the kids have like lower back pain too. It's a great one to help with that. In addition, here we go to upper body pull work. So the bent rows, the dumbbells, bands, very inexpensive investment for any coach, but they can go and deliver massive, massive results for kids. And it's safe, right? They're almost self-limiting exercises, self-limiting tools that if done in a proper way, in a very supervised way, uh, kids can really benefit from it, and you're not breaking the bank on getting this small setup of tools to help you develop a strength and conditioning program. So we'll talk about that. Bands and rows, they help on strength and stability work there. And this is one that I actually enjoy the most. I think this is where you can get your biggest bang for your buck, because when we're talking about offset stabilization and cross pattern work, we're really talking about sports. We're talking about performance. We don't live in a north and south, east and west patterns, right? We are multifaceted. We go into multi-planes, rotation, transversal plane of movements, and we need to understand why our body does what it does and how it actually works. So I've been bringing a lot of this up with really the back line and really the cross pattern, the spiral lines of myofascia through our bodies, because everything connects, right? Myofascia moves, you hear, your left knee hurts. So it could be, your right shoulder that's an issue because of various things. And I'll leave that, to physical therapists and chiropractors on that. It kind of goes out of my full scope. But when you're able to connect your body and how your body moves, then you're able to understand how to connect it from fingertips to toes, which I'll reference a lot. And it comes back into offsetting. You ever think, if you put in a practical standpoint, when you shovel, when you shovel a snow, we're going to be getting snow up here in the Northeast soon. When you put all that load on the one side, you have to counterbalance on the other side. Same thing happens when you're really flying through the air, twisting, balance, stabilization. Proprioceptive nervous system has to come back in and really have to understand how to move your body. The Golgi tendon, knowing where your arm is out here in space without even seeing it. It's that kind of work that we need to kind of incorporate into our training, because again, like I said earlier in this presentation, most kids don't think about this, right? They don't think deliberately on what they're doing when we ask them to run down, the floor, hit a ramp and flip and twist through the air, right? They don't really think about those things necessarily in the terms of how their body's moving. It's kind of like, it's not what you do, it's how you do it. And so we want to get those kids to start thinking just a little bit of not worrying about landing and hurting themselves, but thinking about how their body is connecting with itself. So that's why it's really important to be able to create that stimulus, which focuses on the center of gravity and balance. So we'll kind of talk a little bit about that as well. And so this is where I'm going to change the camera up a little bit, and we're going to kind of talk about the movement patterns. Before I go, Dan, let me ask you, for right now, is there anything that's kind of popping up in your head that you're feeling as a coach that you would want to kind of see and how things work?
I mean, I think that that was such a good introduction. I think that, you know, with the kids in COVID right now, and not having resources, like one of the kids that I worked with over the quarantine would fill gallon jugs of with water or sand or rocks.
Right.
And he would just collect the stuff from around his yard and make things heavier, and he would have 4 or 5 different gallon jugs filled with different things. And just to let you know, 1 gallon of water is 8.5 pounds. So I mean, that's a pretty good weight right there. So I think that using things that are around the house, or sometimes gyms, it's really nice to have big. Um, sorry, let me. It's really nice to have really complicated workout presentations using kettlebells and all that stuff. But if kids don't have kettlebells, then you're in trouble. If kids are in quarantine and they don't have those resources, so
Right.
using budgets
Right.
and using those things are important. Well, let's go to the studio over here, as you say, and let's see what Anthony's been working on.
Yeah, let's see what we got. So, yeah, I'm gonna actually bring in my lovely assistant here, Lindsay. So I'm gonna have her work, and So what we're going to actually go through, we'll go through all the movements that we were just talking about. And again, what's really great, this is Lindsay, Clark, business partner, co-founder here too with Stacked Up Fitness. What's really great is we have the ability to kind of have all of our tools here in our studio. So we do have our barbells, we do have TRX and wall mounts, and a lot of the weight that we can do a lot of this work. So as we talk about these patterns, what we're going to do is we're going to kind of go through some of the movements themselves and kind of understand how to break them all down, but also we'll do our best to kind of work on some practical ways that if you have no equipment, or limited equipment, like filling gallons of water or rocks in a bucket, that you can, truly do that. So we'll kind of work through it. We'll also go through some bands, hips, anchor points, things of that nature. So the first things first is to really break down what is a hinge pattern and really what is a squat pattern and the slight difference. I'm going to give Lindsay this dowel stick. She's going to put it behind her back, and I'm going to have her really just kind of have this stick here. And this is something you can do with your athletes as well. And we got two views here so you can kind of see it in both. But all you really want to be able to do is if you want to work a hinge pattern, it's like popping the hips back, right? So if she's popping her hips back, you can see that the dowel stick stays really at these 5 points, right up near her cervical spine, thoracic cage, right down at a lumbar spine, and the bar doesn't come off. So if you can do a couple more movements like that, like 5 more movements. You can kind of see this is truly a hinge pattern, right? You're working from your hips, pushing your butt back a little bit. And again, you'll see we're going to put a band on in a little bit, and you'll see how the band pulls you back and allows you to feel the hips coming back. Real quick, we're going to now go into a squat pattern. I'm going to take this dowel stick away, and Lindsay's just going to basically do a squat pattern. So a squat pattern slightly different is you're going to be going more from like your knees. So if you want to go through that, let's go down and do like 5 squats. Slight difference here is that she's not going to be just flexing at the waist and pushing the butt back. She's now down in a very low position. Another great way that we actually do this, and again, hopefully you can see that slight difference, is that if you get somebody closer to the wall, Lindsay, if you want to go to that wall, I'll go to this wall. And what we're going to do is you're going to see both of us do it at the same time. But what you're going to do is you're going to come away from the wall, and all you want to do is be able to push your butt back towards the wall, right? And then come right back up. Push your butt towards the wall. If your butt can push into the wall, you're going right into a hinge pattern, right? Now, if you want to go into a squat pattern, the slight difference is you're going straight down. And you can see that our butts are not hitting that wall. It's due to the fact that we're just going straight down into more of a vertical plane. And so I'm going to have Linz do a squat pattern. I'm going to do a hinge pattern at the same time, and you're going to kind of see the slight difference. Ready? And we're going to go about 5 there. Boom, right? You can see the slight difference in the movement here where I'm loading up more my glutes and my hamstrings, where Lindsay's loading up more of her quads and going more into the hip flexors in the front of the body. So once we kind of understand those two movement patterns and the base level of what they are, you can start understanding how to add more weight or kind of technique to them. Whenever we talk to kids, we talk about jumping mechanics. Jumping is a huge, powerful movement. So the fact is, if we can get a kid to jump better, then they're going to have more acceleration to run down the track. And the biggest thing is they need to get their hamstrings and the engine firing. So when you jump, do you actually go down or do you go back when you're initially starting? A lot of kids say down, right? Well, if Lindsay's going to do a jump, if you can squat and jump up in the air, just do that 3 times. You're going to see that her body goes down and jumps through. Whereas if you're doing a hinge pattern, pushing the butt back, loading the hamstrings, firing up, you're going to get a lot more power when you actually go back instead of going straight down. So when we talk about it is when you develop power and acceleration, you want to learn how to load up your backside, your hamstrings, glutes, get that driving energy going, and then fire right through. So we're going to do a couple things right now where if you have a kettlebell, we'll start with a kettlebell. Lindsay's going to put that kettlebell behind her back like so. And again, you can use a dumbbell. We're just fortunate to have, again, a kettlebell there. You can really take your hands. You don't even need anything, quite honestly. Same concept with a dowel stick. Here, we're just moving it up another progression. She's gonna push her butt back towards that kettlebell, right? And then come right back up. Do that about 5 more times. If you are more of a squat pattern, right, you teach your kids, this bell doesn't move, right? But if Lindsay was gonna go into a squat pattern, if Lindsay, you wanna go into a squat pattern now, it's just awkward, right? It just doesn't feel right, correct? Yeah, it just feels awkward. It's another teaching cue to have kids learn how to do their patterns that way. So you have your dowel stick, you have your kettlebell, and this alone can give a kid enough stimulus in the backside of their posterior chain to get the benefit of doing really any kind of deadlift. So now we have the kettlebell in front, and here, if your toes are pointing straight ahead, right, you can just go straight down, come straight up. And here it's about being able to push your hips back, keeping the chin tucked, and taking one simple kettlebell, and boom, you got your deadlift. You're loading up your hamstrings as much as you're pulling up through the ground, right? You're pulling from the floor. You're activating those glutes and the hamstrings to really get them activated. Again, I know a lot of this is going kind of fast, but what's fun about it is once you get the kids to learn the hinge pattern, learn how to get their hips firing, you're going to see the difference in their running mechanics, difference in their jumping mechanics, and they're starting to get their movement patterns down and getting more muscles to come to the table. And that's huge. Is some kids just don't even understand how to jump, and they're losing so much strength and even power out of every step they take because they just don't know. It's like, you don't know what you don't know. And once you do know it, all of a sudden things just elevate. So here you go. I'm going to have Lindsay step in. Here, like we're talking about, we're going to work on that hinge pattern. Bands are fairly inexpensive. They really are. There's not that expensive to get a few. 2 or 3 bands is all you need. Here we have about 1.5 inch band. I'm going to have Lindsay walk out. We have it attached to the low setting on our high-low really stack track, but it's all good. Here, I want Lindsay to just work that pattern and fire through about 5 to 6 reps. Here you can see the band pulling her back. And again, I know you guys don't feel it now, but if you were ever doing this, it's almost a necessity for her to have the hips go back. The band's not allowing her to do anything other than that. So what's really great is even having a slight band, it teaches an athlete how to engage their glutes and fire it up. Now I'm going to have Lindsay do 5 jumps with the bands around her hips. So regular body weight jump here. And you can see how it almost pulls her back a little bit, but it forces her to get the hips involved and squeeze. And even trying to get her hips through is forcing her to get a lot more activation going. So we've gone from dowel stick to kettlebells to bands, all working on that one simple RDL or Romanian deadlift or deadlift pattern. It's really trying to hit that backside, hips, glutes, fired up. Here we have a barbell. Again, if you're fortunate enough to get into strength and conditioning and have a barbell set up, you can go to that next progression. Here we have, again, a light bar, 45 pounds. And I'm going to have Lindsay get down into a good position here. This bar needs to stay inside her area base, meaning behind her toes, and making sure that it's not going further out because that's going to put more strain on her lower back. And she's just going to grip the bar, keeping a nice neutral spine. Head is tucked so that that spine is all the way flat. And she's just going to drive up from a full foot. Boom. Getting into full stance. What you'll notice, what's really cool about it is her ankle, her knees, and her shoulder, plus her head is all staying in this one straight line. So if you want to stand up, boom, shoulders, hips, ankles, knees, everything's straight. That's a great kind of cue. So if you want to do like 5 of them, go for it. This is really a simple movement, except it gets very, very difficult if you don't understand that your butt's supposed to sink back, glutes firing, spine is neutral, and it's really just drawing a line from the ankles, knees, hips, shoulders, head, straight up and down. Okay. So that's really your deadlift pattern. It's also an RDL. The RDL is really a stiff leg deadlift. And so we just did a deadlift from the floor. I'm going to have you grab the bar one more time. And the slight difference between a full deadlift and an RDL, like we were mentioned before, is that Lindsay's going to just load it up and not go all the way to the floor. So you're going to stand it right up. She's just going to go right below her knees. So if she goes right below her knees, she gets everything loaded up. You don't need to go all the way down to the ground per se. Her hamstrings are loaded. You feeling that? She's like shaking right now. So let's do 5 of those. Boom, and squeeze it right up. Because when you look at how a gymnast will jump or run down the floor, they might not ever need to get all the way down to the floor. And most of the times, what I find is because gymnasts are so mobile, right, or flexible, I should say, what happens, you want to show a really bad form of lifting it up? Yeah, ready? Watch what happens with her back. She'll round her shoulders and try to lift like that. And I feel bad for Lindsay for even doing that. But most gymnasts, because they don't have stabilization in their shoulders, they don't understand how to retract back. And we'll get into that in a little bit. They don't know how to retract back. We don't focus on it. They'll round their shoulders and try to lift it like this rounded back, which is just, you can feel how horrible that is. It puts too much strain on that lower lumbar. And that is probably the number one issue that we see with young kids and especially gymnasts, because they're so used to just being like, I can do all this, and they'll do it. And then all of a sudden they'll round their shoulders and they'll lift with their lower back and cause lower back pain. So some cues to think about when doing deadlift patterns, and it could be with the kettlebell, dumbbells by your side, is I always tell clients, gymnasts, young athletes, think about the retraction, the shoulder blades coming together. Think about pulling the shoulder blades together and squeezing a pencil in your back. And kids and parents and really anyone, and even you right now, might be going, why am I going to have a kid think about their upper thoracic spine, their upper back, when they're doing a lower body exercise? It's because if that is not locked into position, if your back isn't tight and the shoulder blades locked, everything down that whole entire chain is just a mess. So I tell kids, roll the shoulder blades back, lock them into place, and let the pattern of the deadlift happen, because it's a given. The pattern's going to happen. It's just whether or not you're in really good position for it. So that's really an exhausting talk about the RDL, about the deadlift and pulling from the floor, from jumping mechanics, power, force, application. That one exercise is a beautiful one to teach them how to get the most out of the engine in their body, aka backside glutes and hamstrings. As we go forward, we're going to talk about the squat pattern. And I'm going to move this off to the side. We're going to grab the kettlebell again to start. And we're going to go into a kettlebell goblet squat. I'm going to have you turn, Miss Linz, just at a nice little 45-degree angle. Beautiful. Here we have one kettlebell again. Simple, right? What we're going to do is we're going to focus on that squat pattern. So we're going to go straight down this time. I love saying elbows, bony part of the elbow, hit the meaty part of the knee. I know some people don't like that statement because it might not always do that, but it's easy for kids to kind of grasp that concept about coming right down. So we're going to squat down, and let's do about 5 of them in a row. Here, again, shoulder blades are retracted. Her spine is nice and neutral. She's squatting straight down. You can see that she's coming down to about a parallel position. Most of it is coming into her quads, and it's not that she is going back per se, she's going more straight down. And I love having an athlete come down and sit in that position for a little bit. I like them actually opening up and like shaking their hips out a little bit to really get the understanding of, one, how their hips feel in that low position, where the muscles are firing, and also how much their core is firing up. It's tiring for you, right? It gets that way. So that's another way that you can do a squat pattern with just a simple kettlebell. And that's great with that level. Here, what I'm going to have Lindsay do, I'll take that kettlebell, is grabbing dumbbells. You don't need that much in a dumbbell, but here I'm going to give Lindsay a pair of dumbbells, and we're going to bring them right up to our shoulders. This is what I mean by skeletal loading too, is that her weight is at the shoulders. The kettlebell, it was at her chest. And we're going to do the same movement. We're going to go straight up and down. Here, I like the front rack position. It forces her core to work, gets it connecting, and you're now using 2 different types, 2 of the dumbbells. So now you have the stimulus in both hands. A lot of extra exercises come out of this, from pressing up overhead if you wanted to, really kind of getting that full range of motion going. It's a great exercise to do, but it nonetheless squat pattern, right? 90 degrees, more straight up and down. I have this set up here. Lindsay's going to love this one. We were working this out yesterday. Rear foot elevated split squat. Split squats are great exercises to do. The original split squat is just literally splitting your squat up and going straight up and down. But what I'm having here is I'm going to have Lindsay bring her knee down to the ground, and I want her to just sit there. This is a great position to have your athletes get into just to get those hip flexors loosened up a little bit. If the knee's down on the ground, I would say whatever knee's on the ground, lift up that same arm. So Lindsay's got her left knee on the ground, her left arm is up, and you're gonna feel this nice stretch through the whole entire body, and you get your hip flexors loosened up. You get your athletes doing this, they're gonna think their quads ripping off their leg because they're most likely slightly tight in that position, but it helps them kind of feel the connective tissue across their whole entire body. Nice little breathe and stretch. You can bring that arm down. Here in this position, it's the same concept, perfect neutral spine. So if you have athletes that just aren't getting this like retraction in your shoulders, it's hard for them to really understand how to get their scaps involved. Putting them into this rear foot elevated split position can help them keep this spine neutral, right? And keep their whole entire vertebrae stacked up while driving through and getting not only their backside glutes and hamstrings firing, but also their quads. And it forces them to really get their muscles activated. This is essentially a single leg squat. So if you want to do a couple up and down, boom, straight up and down, you can see, Lynn, some of the things that we want to avoid is a knee going over the toe, right? So you might be able to put your hand here to almost mimic the wall so that she's not doing it. And I know her muscles are hurting right now because she did this yesterday, but you'll have them do a few of them. And what's great is that you see her spine is staying neutral. This is actually a really hard exercise. You don't need a lot of weight, but it has a huge big bang for the buck kind of concept to it, because not only do you get your hips to loosen up a little bit more, but it forces you to have to use your leg, your single leg driving force. You can't use momentum to like pop down on the ground and fire it up, right? So that exercise, rear foot elevated split squat, would be one that I would definitely tell you to get involved in a strength training program, more so than say a normal lunge where a lot of kids will push their knee forward or they're just sloppy with their balance. That forces them to really set it up properly. So again, progressions and regressions or split squats. You know, you can go reverse lunge into it, right? Alternating. And then, of course, rear foot elevated split squat. So that's really the squat pattern itself. Here, what we're going to do, I'm going to actually go moving right along with this program and with these movements. And Dan, do you have any questions so far as we kind of are moving from lower body to upper body, or does anyone have any questions that might be popping up right now?
Yeah, I mean, one question that I have is
Yeah.
how do you get the guys to be more, um, I guess, aware of knee placement and not letting their knees buckle in or flare out? That's one thing that I notice, especially when kids are using weights that's too much or the sets are too long. They start buckling. They start. How do you do either tactile or what are strategies that you use to help them be more efficient technically with knee bending?
Yeah. So again, another low cost investment that really creates a great training environment for a young kid is bands, right? Whether you get them at Perform Better, whether you go and find them online. Again, with everything going on now, gym equipment is just blowing up, right? A lot of people have a lot of various things. We have bands as well. Getting some bands here, I'm gonna give Lindsay these bands here. The best way to do that is, one, just let the kids know. A lot of times kids aren't even aware that their knees collapse in. They almost think it's just normal body movement behavior. And so what we would suggest is that if the knees are buckling in, mention it to them, call them out on it, right? A lot of times you could flare their toes out slightly, And once a kid is aware, they're, they'll change. They'll start understanding it. You talk about gripping your feet into the ground and really pressing and rotating those feet and ground them. But if you're finding that, okay, it's still difficult, buy a pair of bands, whether it's TheraBands, those things, tie them in a band, get them above your knees. And so what happens is the stimulus of it's really glute inactivity is what's going on. Your glutes aren't strong enough to handle the stresses that are going on when they're doing a squat, that their knees will collapse in. And so you want to feel that stimulus with a band that when it starts trying to collapse in, the band's going to get loose. So it goes, wait a second, no, I got to press out. So I'm going to have Lindsay here do a few reps of just a regular body weight squats. And you can see the band being pressed out a little bit here and being able to, again, handle that stress. And just having a band around your knees like Lindsay has here is teaching the kid or teaching the young athlete that they have to keep engaged with their muscles. Now, Lindsay, if you don't mind going down and buckle your knees in a little bit, you can see that the band gets a little loose and it's going to teach the kid like, wait a second, my knees are collapsing in. Again, it's all about this mindfulness. And too many times we're mindless and we just go through movements and we just don't even think about it. Our subconscious mind comes in and it's just like breathing. We don't really think about it anymore, whether it's good or bad. And so this is one of those prime examples where you have to start feeling your body a little bit more. And bands are a great way to do that. So does that kind of help with that question, Jen, on that?
Yeah, of course. Thank you so much. Does
Awesome.
anybody, before we go, as Anthony says, maybe now is a good time. Dave, anybody else? Jen, anybody else have any questions, or can we move on?
No, I think it's all good, man.
All
Yep,
right, sweet.
good to go.
Yeah, definitely. And I always like to mention this too, is that I take this as a great honor to be able to speak to, but by all means as an open forum too. When anyone has any added tips or tricks that they have, love to hear it. And just this presentation is just, it's more about you and us together more so than it is about me totally. So the fact is it's great to kind of be able to have that engagement too if you need it. So as we move from the lower body into the upper body, what the most important thing that I find with young athletes, especially gymnasts, is being able to get their stability and their strength in their shoulders. You know, it's not about necessarily having six-pack abs or making sure that their core is strong. It's going to be. I have a strong belief that a young athlete, a young gymnast, is not going to be able to do most of the activities that we're going to ask them to if they had a weak core. You know, that doesn't mean we have to avoid it. Doesn't mean that we're not going to do abs and planks. But quite honestly, if you can get your shoulder blades and really the scapular muscles, right, the rotator cuff muscles to stabilize and get them strong, as well as get them to understand how to retract and work that those muscles in the backside, you're going to be able to get a lot more out of your athletes. So what we do here is we talk about really pulling exercises, as well as utilizing bands to help work stabilization in your shoulders. So if Lindsay was going to turn around, what we're really talking about here is your thoracic spine, right? Rotator cuff muscles here up and around, right? And your upper back. And that can happen from working on your kind of delts, your muscles of the shoulders, your rhomboids, again, rotator cuff muscles that support the scap, all that. Your core being your lower lumbar, obliques, and abdominals, those are going to come. So what we're going to do here is this. Again, we have a TRX, very space-saving suspension trainer. There's a lot out there that you can, again, purchase nowadays, get an anchor up here, and you can get athletes to do a mirror of movement patterns with the TRX. And just using their body weight, it can be super helpful all in itself. I mean, you can get some of these straps from Home Depot and tie, again, just towels on it to work on grip strength while you're pulling. It doesn't have to be, a $200 piece for a TRX. It can just really be a simple accessory that you might have up on the wall. So just be mindful that we're not saying you have to go out and go buy, tons of equipment. Be creative, right? So we're going to fall back. And what we're going to do here is we're going to keep the suspension training, right? This is why suspension training is great for us, is because we're going to pull up, we're going to do about, 5 or 6 reps. And you want to stay strong with your whole entire core. You're like a flat board from your heel all the way up through your body, squeezing the shoulder blades. We're not talking about, doing 50 reps. We're talking about deliberate practice with maybe 3 sets of 8, 3 sets of 10, just to work on the strength of your forearms, biceps, triceps, shoulders, delts, the whole backside. Because it's the instability of the suspension training that's really maximizing the stability in your shoulders. So you guys can relax right there. Cool. In addition, again, coming back, we have bands. We're going to talk about that. Here, you get bands. What happens? Let's go back just a little bit more, quarter squat position, and we're going to start pulling back. Here, it's strength as you pull and stability as you go out, right? You got to stabilize your muscles firing through. If a young athlete can't stabilize, right, you'll see the shaking of the muscles happening because these muscles have to fire correctly and they don't know what to do. So you see them shaking to try to get any little muscle fiber to grab on to help them support this stability. So bands here are a great way to work on being able to move. And again, they don't take up a lot of space. So here we have the rows with the bands. We have our TRX suspension training. I mean, you can end up, again, if we were to take any of it, shoot, get some more bands here. You got bands you want to step on and do some curls, right? You can literally step on it, do bicep curls, right? Why? Because again, the forearms, the extenders, everything that's going to help you support the shoulder can come into play. Again, this is just us playing around sometimes with, again, this wasn't on my presentation, but it's all the things that we can do with bands to help us, again, engage in getting your upper body, lower body to be more stable, build some basic strength. These young athletes don't need to be able to lift 500 pounds. They need to be able to take their body weight, maybe just a little more, and be able to be more explosive with it, be able to be more powerful with it. So getting more speed to incorporate kind of the power that they need. And Dan and I, you and I, we've talked about this before, is how do we get a young athlete to be more explosive, to be more powerful? It's not putting more mass on their body per se. It's about being able for them to be more stable, have more strength, and then be able to fire that through quicker and quicker and quicker so that they, one, don't get injured, and two, can be able to be kind of a stronger athlete later down the road. And that's going to be able to happen when you start working stability, balance, focused, balance, stability, and core strength. So that's the bands here. In addition, a pair of dumbbells, right? I'm going to have Lindsay grab both pair of dumbbells, and look what we're going to do. We're going to do a bent over row. So here, basic movement pattern, right? Shoulders retracted back. Look at this. She's sitting back into an RDL position or loading up the hamstrings, right? And here we're just pulling back through the muscles. She can do an alternating row as well. So here you just change it where you're doing alternating rows, working on offset training here, right? Where she's getting a different stimulus. And we can stand right up there. We had coaches one time, I asked them, I'm like, tell me some hinge pattern movements. And they said a bent over row. And I was kind of like, why would somebody say a bent over row is actually like a hinge pattern? And they said, because you're doing this isometric hold, right, while you're rowing. I was like, okay, I can see where you're going. It was a little stretch, but it's the same concept. You can get a lot out of one movement. In addition, I'm not sure if you're going to feel good with using the 15s, but can you do a reverse fly? So here, reverse fly, right? Still loading up that hinge pattern, pushing the butt back, pulling the shoulder blades together here, reverse fly. Simple movement. You do not need a lot of weight. 15 pounds for Lindsay, who is really strong, is almost too much. So we're talking about using smaller weights like 2 5-pound weights. Things that, again, are not that massively expensive, but you can incorporate and push them off into the side in your gym, but be able to have them do a set of reverse flies, rows, get some bands, TRX. Again, I just listed off 5 exercises that all young athletes can do that are very, again, inexpensive equipment. In addition, not that time consuming to run through 3 sets of 5, 3 sets of 8 within a routine at your facility, yet can yield so much benefit to not only a coach who wants to teach higher level skills, but also the athlete, which is the most important thing. It helps them become less prone to injury. All right. So we have dumbbells here. We have the bands, the TRX suspension training, all working on retraction of the shoulder blades, bracing your core, getting everything in your upper back to fire through, which leads me now to our kettlebell and offset training, our get ups and arm bars. So here we have a kettlebell. I'm going to have Lindsay drop down on the ground, get out of camera view here. And there's two movements that I love seeing. It's really the get up and using the kettlebell as we have the sun pouring in. I apologize for that. With the kettlebell, again, with this, I'm going to take it from you. Kettlebell, not that expensive per se for small kettlebells, right? We're talking, this is a 20-pound kettlebell, not that heavy per se, probably a little too heavy for young athletes, but it's something where it's not a massive big investment, but one kettlebell can go so far with hinge patterns, squat patterns, kettlebell stabilization, get ups, arm bars. But again, you can do it with dumbbells. It doesn't have to be kettlebell. But here, you're going to lock it in. Boom. Lindsay's going to press her arm up. The arm that's up is a knee that's up. Okay. You can extend that long leg out to the side just a little bit to give it a little bit more balance. But this alone, if a young athlete's never done any kind of strength training, this alone, this perturbation aspect can get the shoulder blade firing and working. It's going to be part of the arm bar later on, but here, just holding a kettlebell over your head can really stimulate the stabilization and the strength that a young athlete needs in their shoulder. But here, we're going to take this right here. The get up is super difficult to do. There's a lot of bits and pieces to it. So you try to break it down. And with the 2-3 minutes that we're going to break this down, it's definitely not enough time to talk about the kettlebell, but I'll give you a good understanding of what it actually looks like and how you can actually apply it. So I'm going to have Lindsay full sit up with the kettlebell up over her head. That alone gets her core firing, gets her hip flexors locking into position, and gets her body really kind of stimulated with this bar overhead. Just alone of not wanting to drop the kettlebell on your head, it causes some stability issues. So now she's going to press up onto her arm and almost create this full connection, fingertips to fingertips. She's going to bring her hips up, working on this hip thrust action, right? This T. Then she slides her leg underneath into a tall lunge position, where then she gets up and centers herself tall and then stands right up. Boom. Right? So that's really just how you get up. Oh, we're going to come back down too, but Lindsay's arm is tired, as you already know. So you're going to press that arm up. Then you reverse lunge it. Create that T in that place, that palm down on the ground. Eyes looking up. You can see this connection through her whole entire body. Core's firing. Then her hips and everything needs to stabilize. Slide that leg underneath. Slowly coming back down and slowly sitting back down and not crashing the kettlebell on her head. So I'm only going to have her do one right now because that's super difficult. Okay. It's difficult to connect everything through your body. But as a young gymnast, you need to understand that that is exactly what they're doing. Every movement that they do, doesn't matter what routine, they're going to have to get their whole body connected. And that is a huge thing that kind of gets kind of lost in the skills. If a young athlete doesn't know how to have reaction and understand how to connect their whole body, they're going to have difficulty doing a higher level skill. Even though they get it mentally, they might not be able to get it physically just because of that connection. Okay. So just be mindful that the kettlebell get up helps with that dramatically because every muscle has to connect. It's not a glamorous one. It's not one that kids really see a lot of times. A lot of our clients as well, the adult clientele, they don't want to do it because it's kind of boring and slow. But that's the thing where it's about being able to teach them the awareness of why they're doing it and having them connect their body all the way through and say, this is going to have higher level benefits to you, not right at this moment, but later on in your career. So here, we're going to do the arm bar. The arm bar is set up very similar where you have that kettlebell right at that arm pressing right up. Lindsay's going to have her knee, same knee is going to be bent. And it's exactly the way that the kettlebell get up is set up, but this is a lower progression, I guess you would, a little bit safer too, not as many movements. But what it is that you're going to have your arm locked out. The opposite arm is going to go above your head. Here, we then rotate over where this leg, that bent leg, is now your kickstand. So you're going to bring the knee out, boom, and you're going to have a little kickstand. Your eyes can be up at the thing, and you can see that she's all shaking. Her core is now firing. Here's the big thing. This is a great position to be in if this is the first time they've ever done it. You're going to see that her arm is going to like shake her whole body. I'm going to have her head lay on her arm and her eyes looking straight at the camera here. Now she's not seeing her arm. This is where the Golgi 10, this is where proprioceptive nervous system comes in, is like, where is this arm in space? And all of a sudden, her core is firing. If you want to see something really happen, this isn't that heavy, right? It's only a 20-pound kettlebell. But if I ask Linz to stack her feet, she's going to stack her feet with these cute little bow shoes on that she has and have her toes dorsiflex, flexed up, having her head relax, and she's shaking like a leaf right now. That's what's funny about this. Why? Because it's all about stabilizing her shoulder. It's all about being able to get her core connected, her knees, everything from fingertips to toes has to connect. And if I was just to be able to tap, she's already shaking. Why? Because her shoulder needs to stabilize. I can guarantee most young gymnasts will have a hard time doing this because of that fact that they don't stay focused on stabilizing their shoulder. They just do. So I'm going to have Lindsay, Lindsay just pop right out of it. Technically, you bring your knee out, kickstand it, arm is up, you roll back over, boom, 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 and then now you're done, right? She's looking at me like that, like you're crazy. So right there, I know we're coming up to the top of the hour here, but those exercises and those movements are the ones that are so important to get involved in a young athlete and especially a young gymnast's body because they connect everything from the floor all the way up. And if you can get the lower body, your glutes, your quads, your hips to dominate, in addition, get your shoulders, scaps stabilized and strong, the skills that you can teach these young athletes will exponentially get easier. And most likely they're going to get better just because of those strength levels. So remember, young kids most likely hear what you're saying when it comes to doing a new skill. They just might not have the physical capacity yet or the stabilization to do what you're asking them to. And so by forcing something that, they get, but they're not ready for, is just asking for more injuries. So by incorporating a very simple 2 to 3 times a week simple program, you can really maximize your young gymnast's ability to do more for you than causing them to try to force something that might cause more injuries later down the road. So thank you, Lindsay, for giving me those demos. I'm going to switch my camera back and kind of finish it off and showcase to you guys just the practical application, if you would, in regards to what I'm talking about. So Dan, do you also have anything that that you want to add or anything that you are thinking about right now?
Can you talk about how to lift a weight up and put a weight down? We talk about
Yeah.
rolling weights. Like if we're gonna allow these little guys to start using, the tool, I want to make sure that what we're doing is setting them up to use the tool correctly and
Right.
not add unnecessary risk.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, whenever it all depends on the exercise specifically, but anything from the floor, what you're looking to do is have everything really connected. So we brought it out to what I'll end up doing. Let me see if I can throw this out there. But you can see from the side view camera action is that some of the biggest issues that we see, okay, is the shoulders rounding, right? And so when you have your shoulders rounded and they're trying to lift, it's just all that back pain just going to fire up. What you want to be able to do is just really sit into it, get your body down low, and be able to have everything locked in position. Your core should be braced, right? Core, abs, everything like locked. You want to be able to have your feet pressed in, and you want to come up lift with your legs. You hear about that all the time, right? Lift with your legs, being able to make sure that you're not just picking something up and leading off to the side. Things should be neutral. Things should be stacked into position. So whether it's dropping down low, pulling up with two hands, driving from your full feet or from your full foot, you come up, right? And if you need power to come up to get it up, you can do that as well, right? When it's talking about the kettlebell get up and things of that nature, you want to be able to not just grab a dumbbell like I just did or a kettlebell just like that and like whip it up and throw it up. You want to be able to keep it as close to your body as possible. When you keep things close to your body, right? You keep things close to your body, you're able to feel almost connected with it, because the further away that that weight is from your body, the more strain you're going to have on that joint. So whether it's from me lifting from out here, trying to pull it up, oh, that ain't good, right? Bring it close to your body. Use two hands. Keep everything really as close to you and braced prior to lifting are really the key elements to making sure you're not just going to throw your back out, right? Or lifting it like that. Not great. Wide base, lift closer to your body, use two hands when possible, and keep everything connected. So those are some of the things that I would say are kind of important components when it comes to lifting. So hopefully that made sense there.
Thank you so much. I appreciate that guidance.
Yeah, no, definitely. So yeah, really, I mean, what it comes back down to is really just this the program layout. Like I said before, whether you feel you're good and like if you feel like you're ready for a program to incorporate into an athlete's routine, this is what I'm talking about. Simple stuff. 3 circuits, 2-3 times a week. So
Hey, I stopped the screen share.
yeah.
So
Okay. Yeah, I can. Yeah, I can share that again one more time. But yeah, it's basic stuff. It's really some of those things where, you know, it's not about reinventing the wheel. It's not about going, you know, crazy, dynamic movements. It's doing the simple thing savagely well. And when that happens, great things can happen. So, you know, my biggest thing is just really learn how to do these movements as effective as possible. You know, start with small groups. You don't want to have the whole team or your whole entire, you know, facility come together and do a full program, because you want to keep your eyes on them as well. And once the kids start learning how to do things, maybe that is where you can start kind of branching them off and putting it into play. But it goes back to the KISS model too. Keep it simple, stupid, right? And you know, when you work these movement patterns, a lot of them are self-limiting, meaning if they can't do the lift, they won't be able to actually get hurt. Meaning, again, teach the patterns. You know, I'll have here too kettlebell carries. I didn't talk about it, but it's literally just holding weight by your side, working on retracting your shoulder blades, and have them walk around the gym. That alone helps on grip strength. It helps alone working on stabilization of their shoulders. And it's these simple things that you can do to really, again, elevate a young athlete's performance. And the younger they are, the easier the exercise has to be, the less weight they have to use. And again, these kids are so athletic that taking some time away from gymnastics, just even for 10-15 minutes, it will actually mentally help them out. I mean, a lot of kids are just like, you know, they're tired of the same routine. You get them doing something different and get them to be smart. They listen to coaches. At least the gymnasts I know, they're so focused in on how you coach them. They listen, they care. You guys are with them so much, even through virtual stuff now, that they want to hear what you have to say, because you're the one teaching them these high level skills. And if they don't, they're going to get hurt. So incorporating something like this while they're listening, while they're kind of taking your guidance so to heart, it's a great time to teach them why they're doing it. And again, even if they can't get to the gym, these are things that can help them out. This is like their periodization scheme, meaning this is a time that they should be focusing on this strength work. So when they do come back into the gym, they're ready for it. So I guess I'll leave with that. And And yeah, if you guys need anything more, feel free to reach out. Uh, love talking strength and conditioning for gymnasts. It's fun. Got a lot of great, intelligent people here too. So everyone on this call and everyone that's part of Region 6, it's a great region to be a part of because you guys work hard. You love these kids. You love the sport. And I haven't seen another region like this. So USA Gymnastics, really lucky to have you, Dan, and lucky to have the group of people that we do. So great stuff.
Anthony Passamonte, everybody. I appreciate all of your insight and making it easy for the guys to, take something that might not be so attainable, but, condense it, make it so that we can start moving forward in an informed and safe manner.
Yeah,
So,
definitely.
special thanks to Lindsay. Obviously, her efforts should be well commended.
Yeah.
And then I guess the next lecture really is the next step. Now that the kids have learned these patterns and they've done them for 2 or 3 years and they're 15, 16 years old, the next step is to take that information to a more elite or high end perspective. And today we are going to have a discussion with Duesh here and Dave Tilley, and they have extensive knowledge in prehab and sports and exercise sciences, and they're going to talk about elite training programs for gymnasts. So this is Duesh. Welcome, Duesh. Nice to have you. We're going to start.
Thanks for having me.
So we're going to go on a little break, but then we'll come back and I'll introduce you guys. And this is Dave Tilley right here, the Honorable Dave Tilley. I'm sure everybody's aware of this guy. So we'll come back in a couple of minutes and then we'll get started. So looking forward to that.